Somebody took the papers, and somebody's got the key, and somebody's nailed the door shut. It says, hey, what you think that you see? But me, I'm down around the corner. You know I'm looking for Miss Linda Lee.
We grew up knowing my uncle from a very early age, of course. My first memories of him were as an illustrator, and his specialty was illustrating shoes. And I'd see him late at night sitting at a table, picking up shoes and drawing them one by one. But his drawing ability was incredible. So it left me with the inspiration to become an illustrator also, and that's what I do today. I do children's books. As far as his legacy goes, one point while he was doing his illustration, he started a new type of art, and he was doing pictures of soup cans, which was kind of unusual, but to us in the family it was very special. But he was taking an ordinary object, so ordinary that it was kind of laughable by the art community to think that it could be art. And I think at that point he started to change the perception of the art world, and it got him noticed. And from that point on he became very well known. But he was never as famous as he become in recent years. My uncle died 27 years ago in 1987, and he was considered important, but nowhere near as important as he is in 2014. So that's hard to explain. I think that when art historians and curators look at his life's work, they see a connection of how he linked a certain part of the past with the future, and he was an important link. Just as Picasso was an important link, or Salvador Dali, or any number of artists all through art history. So we're still in the family. We just still can't believe it. We have to pinch ourselves to think, gee, our Uncle Andy is the same one and the same of named Andy Warhol. But it's certainly a surprise, and it's certainly wonderful. And I'm always asked the question about what we think of him, and he was very special. When he started to bring attention to popular culture, it was probably at its infancy, and nowadays reality TV and with the computer and the internet world and blogging and all the different things like Facebook or tweeting, it was almost predicted by what he was doing with his art. He certainly would be experimenting with today's technologies, because at the time he was always interested in new things, and his whole idea of creating was about trying new things. At the time when he started doing his art in the early 60s, he had to figure out a way of reproducing his art in a better and faster fashion, and so thus he discovered silk screening, and silk screening was the way he went. After a few years, he discovered that he wanted to do film, so he wanted his pictures to move, and he did experimental films for a number of years. And at some point, he shifted to doing celebrity portraits, and he was a society portrait painter. Today, he would be doing society portrait paintings because it was what earned enough money to keep his studio running. But there's also an aspect that would be unpredictable, because my uncle was very unpredictable in many things. So it's as far as being trying to predict a certain thing that he would have been doing is a little difficult. I think most of his art can be appreciated by young and old. Most of it, of course, some of it is adult and can only be appreciated by a mature person. I wouldn't think that some of it should be seen by a young child. But I think in general, most of it, 95% of it is very entertaining, very, let's say, appreciative, because you recognize the themes, the subject matter quite quickly. They weren't too abstract. Abstract art is hard to understand, but my uncle's art wasn't abstract. It was he did many things as far as he did famous Americans. He did the themes with like the endangered species theme. He did famous athletes. He did the famous 20th century Jewish portraits. But as far as being misunderstood, well, I think he couldn't explain his artwork. I think it was very instinctive. I think a lot of art historians tried to interpret it a certain way. I don't think he would try to interrupt that, or if somebody said something that was probably not true, I think he often said, "Oh, it doesn't matter." I guess in the end he figures it'll always kind of sort itself out as far as why they think he made it, or and it's also, you know, art is in the eye of the beholder, so everybody's going to have a little bit of a different interpretation of it. I mean, that's the beauty of art. It can be appreciated on different levels. As far as my uncle goes, I don't think I think he was instinctive and extremely creative in an spontaneous way. I don't think he was able to explain it to anybody, even his closest friends. He just did it. His ideas are always unique. My uncle, while he was alive, he very rarely wanted to license his imagery out in a commercial way. In a way, it's kind of a contradiction, because he was extracting his imagery from a commercial kind of world and making art, and now the art was being transferred back into the commercial world. Now, my uncle, he didn't want that. So in today's world, the imagery is handled by a foundation, the estate of Andy Warhol, and they believe that it's important to promote his imagery through commercial means by putting it on, you know, shower curtains, bed sheets, perfume, skateboards, snowboards, you name it. They licensed his imagery out to these different products. I personally don't agree with it. I think in a way it overexposes it and overexposes it and uses it in a way that it wasn't meant to be. So, but it keeps it out in the limelight, and fortunately people haven't gotten too tired of his imagery. I'm afraid that it might someday be overexposed, and people will say, Andy Warhol, I've seen too much of Andy Warhol. I see him everywhere, but it has yet to happen. Growing up, we would do numerous trips from Pittsburgh, from the countryside of Pittsburgh to New York City to visit my uncle and my grandmother, who he lived with, and she took care of him. I was illustrating kids' books, and I had yet to write a story of my own, and when I went to start writing a book, I kept on coming back to these stories of these memories of going to visit my uncle, and they're just wonderful memories of growing up, seeing him do his pop art early on, and most documentaries, most interviews, he would never mention the fact that he lived with his mother, and that he had these two brothers that had families that would visit him constantly. So it was a family side of him that most people weren't acquainted with. I thought, if anything, it would show a side of my uncle that will kind of describe him a little bit more, and show that he did have family, and he did have nephews and nieces that he loved and he was a part of. And So for that reason, I think my book does a little bit of a service. It kind of shows a personal side of him that no one was familiar with.